I recently booked an Airbnb in Maplewood, a quiet suburban neighborhood known for its neat modern homes and tree-lined streets. I was looking forward to a peaceful weekend away from the demands of city life, and the photos of the house had sealed the deal. It was a newly built minimalist home with large windows and a sleek design. Nothing fancy, just clean and comfortable, perfect for unwinding. When I arrived, the house looked exactly as expected. The neighborhood was still, with the occasional sound of a lawnmower in the distance, and the street itself was lined with identical, well-maintained homes. I parked in the driveway and walked up to the front door, admiring the clean lines and modern architecture. A small manicured garden framed the entrance, and a motion sensor light flicked on as I approached. Everything seemed perfect for a quiet, uneventful stay. Inside, the house was bright and airy, with high ceilings and open spaces. The living room was minimalist, with just a few pieces of modern furniture and a large flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. The kitchen was immaculate, with stainless steel appliances and a breakfast bar. Upstairs, there were 2 bedrooms and a small office space. I chose the master bedroom, which had an ensuite bathroom and a large window overlooking the backyard. Everything was spotless, and I couldn't have been more pleased with my choice. After unpacking, I decided to take a stroll around the neighborhood. Maplewood was as peaceful as the house itself, with wide sidewalks, young families out for walks, and the occasional cyclist. I passed a few people who smiled and nodded as I walked by, adding to the overall sense of calm. It was the kind of place where nothing out of the ordinary seemed likely to happen. As night fell, I returned to the house, made myself a cup of tea, and settled into the living room with a book. The large windows let in just enough light from the street lamps outside, casting soft shadows across the room. It was quiet, almost too quiet. The only sound was the occasional creak from the house as it settled. I found the silence comforting, a sharp contrast to the constant noise I was used to back in the city. After an hour or so of reading, I decided to head to bed. It was around midnight when I first noticed something strange. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard a faint tapping sound, like something gently knocking against the walls. At first, I thought it might be a branch outside hitting the window, but when I looked, there was nothing there. The sound persisted, soft but distinct, seeming to come from the room next to mine. It was as if someone was tapping lightly on the walls, moving slowly from one spot to another. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was just the house settling or some kind of electrical noise. But as the minutes passed, the sound grew louder and more deliberate, like someone was pacing back and forth in the empty room next door. My heart began to race, and I lay there, listening intently, trying to find a rational explanation. But nothing made sense. The house was brand new, and I was the only one staying there. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of bed, tiptoed down the hallway, and paused outside the door to the second bedroom. The sound stopped abruptly, leaving only an eerie silence. I hesitated, then slowly turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. The room was empty, just as I had left it earlier. The bed was neatly made, and nothing seemed out of place. But as I stepped inside, I noticed something odd. A faint, almost imperceptible chill in the air, as if the room was colder than the rest of the house. I quickly left the room, closing the door behind me, and went back to bed, though sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake, listening for any more noises, but the house remained silent for the rest of the night. The next day, I tried to put the strange events out of my mind. I spent the morning exploring the nearby town, grabbing breakfast at a local cafe and wandering through a small park. The day was sunny and pleasant, and by the time I returned to the house, I had almost convinced myself that I had imagined the whole thing. But that night, the tapping noises returned. Only this time they were louder and more persistent. It sounded as if someone or something was moving through the walls, the tapping growing more insistent as it moved from one room to another. I lay in bed, frozen with fear, as the sounds seemed to circle around me, coming from every direction. I could hear the distinct creak of floorboards, even though the house was supposed to be empty. Eventually, I gathered the courage to get up and investigate. I grabbed my phone for light and cautiously made my way down the hallway, checking each room as I went. When I reached the second bedroom, I noticed something I hadn't seen before: a small square hatch in the ceiling just outside the door. It was slightly ajar, as if someone had recently opened it. My pulse quickened as I stared up at the hatch, realizing it must lead to some kind of attic space. But the house was new, and there had been no mention of an attic in the listing. Ignoring the dread building inside me, I pulled over a chair from the hallway and climbed up to take a closer look. I pushed the hatch open with trembling hands and shone my phone's flashlight into the darkness above. The space was small and unfinished, with exposed beams and insulation. But as the light swept across the dusty floor, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Two small, perfectly circular holes in the ceiling, directly above where the bed in the second bedroom was positioned. It looked as if someone had drilled them recently, as if they had been watching. That was the final straw. I climbed down, slammed the hatch shut, and hurried back to my room to pack my things. I didn't care that it was the middle of the night. I wasn't spending another minute in that house. I grabbed my bag, rushed to the car, and drove away from Maplewood as fast as I could, not stopping until I found a hotel several miles away. The next morning, I messaged the Airbnb host, trying to keep my tone casual as I mentioned the strange noises and the attic hatch. The reply was polite and brief, expressing surprise at my experience. They assured me that no one else had ever reported anything unusual during their stay, and that they would look into it. But as I read their message, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that I had narrowly avoided something far more sinister.
I'm currently staying at this Airbnb in a really quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing ever seems to happen. I booked it because my house is undergoing some major renovations, and I needed a place to stay while the work gets done, a few days away from the chaos of construction to find some peace and quiet. When I arrived, everything seemed perfect. The house is this cute single-story home on a street where every lawn is perfectly manicured, and the only sounds are birds chirping and the occasional dog barking. I was really looking forward to just relaxing, catching up on some reading, and maybe taking some walks around the neighborhood. But then tonight, everything changed. I was flipping through channels on the TV and I landed on the local news. They were talking about a prisoner who had escaped from a facility about 20 miles away. They made it clear this guy was dangerous. And here's the kicker. They believe he might be hiding out somewhere in this general area. The reporter kept emphasizing how people should stay indoors and lock their doors. I mean, the street I'm on is super quiet. No one's around, and it's late, so most of the houses are dark. But that also means if someone was trying to lay low, this would be the perfect spot. It's not exactly comforting to think about. I immediately went around double-checking all the doors and windows, making sure they're locked tight. But the house is older, and I'm not convinced these locks would hold up if someone really wanted to get in. Plus, there's this big window in the living room that looks out onto the street. I keep glancing at it, half expecting to see someone standing there. What's really freaking me out, though, is this weird vibe I'm getting. It's too quiet now. Earlier there were the usual neighborhood sounds, but since hearing the news, it's like everything has gone still. No cars driving by, no voices, nothing. It's probably just my imagination running wild. But I swear I heard a noise outside a little while ago, like footsteps, or maybe the creak of a gate, I can't be sure. Then things took a serious turn. I started hearing police sirens in the distance. At first, they were just faint, but they grew louder and closer. My heart was racing as I strained to hear what was going on. I tried to peek out through the curtains, but the street was too dark to see anything clearly. The sirens eventually stopped, and then came the unmistakable sound of gunshots. They were spaced out, but sharp, each one making me jump. I kept my eyes glued to the window, but all I could see was the darkness of the street. The shots were distant, but they cut through the silence like a knife. I was frozen in place, terrified of what was happening outside. Just as I was trying to steady my nerves, there was a loud, authoritative knock on the door. Not just a knock, but a series of aggressive bangs that made my heart leap into my throat. I stood there, paralyzed, my mind racing. At this hour, with everything that was happening, I couldn't imagine why anyone would be knocking on my door. The knocking continued, growing more insistent. Finally, I mustered the courage to peek through the peephole. To my surprise, I saw several police officers standing outside. I could barely make out their faces, but their presence was undeniable. They were shouting something, but the words were muffled through the door. I cracked open the door just a tiny bit, and that's when I heard it clearly. "Get your hands where we can see them. Get down on the floor, now." The officers' voices were sharp and commanding. My heart was pounding as I watched one of them, gun drawn, making his way up the driveway. Was caught between the urge to bolt and the need to understand what was happening. The officers continued shouting, their commands echoing through the night. I could hear them giving more instructions, but it was chaotic and jumbled. They were clearly focused on someone or something right outside. I hesitated for a moment before opening the door fully. As soon as I did, an officer rushed in, his eyes scanning the room. "Is everything okay in here?" he asked, his voice tense but not unkind. "Yeah, I think so," I managed to stammer, still trying to process everything. "What's going on?" The officer gave me a quick nod and signaled for me to stay back. "We're conducting a search. There's a dangerous escaped convict in the area. We're clearing the neighborhood, so please stay inside and lock your doors." I nodded, still in shock. The officer left, and I heard the sounds of footsteps and more shouting as they continued their search. The adrenaline was making my hands shake as I slammed the door shut and locked it. I quickly checked the windows and made sure everything was secured. The sirens had faded into the distance, but the reality of the situation was sinking in. It's been a few hours since the police left. I haven't heard anything else, and the silence is almost eerie. I'm trying to stay calm, but my nerves are shot. I can't help but feel that this peaceful getaway has turned into a nightmare. What's really unnerving me now is the complete absence of any noise. I'd expect to hear the occasional car, or maybe a distant siren, but it's just this thick, oppressive silence. It's almost like the neighborhood itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Around midnight, I noticed the porch light flickering. I couldn't see anyone or anything out there, but it's like the darkness itself is trying to play tricks on my mind. The light continues to flicker in and out, adding to the sense of foreboding. In a moment of irrational bravery, I decided to check the backyard. I grabbed a flashlight and, trying to steady my shaking hands, went outside through the back door. The backyard is enclosed with a tall fence, and it's so dark I can barely see a few feet in front of me. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but the well-kept lawn and the outline of the shed in the corner. But then I noticed something odd. The shed door was slightly ajar. I'm pretty sure I closed it when I arrived. My heart pounded as I approached, every creak of the wooden planks beneath my feet amplifying my fear. I shone the flashlight inside, but it was empty. Just old garden tools and some stacked firewood. Still, the feeling of unease didn't leave. When I came back inside, I checked the locks again, just to be sure. Everything seemed secure, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something might still be out there. The air in the house feels heavy, like it's pressing down on me, and every little sound seems amplified. I've been trying to distract myself with a book, but I keep looking up at the windows, half expecting to see someone peering in. I'm not sure how much longer I can stay here. My instincts are telling me to leave, but I know I can't go anywhere in the middle of the night, especially with a dangerous fugitive possibly on the loose. So yeah, I'm still here, trying to convince myself it's safe to stay the night. Has anyone else had something like this happen? Am I overreacting? Or would you be on edge too?